You pray every morning. You light candles with devotion. You surrender your life to God with an open heart. But despite all this, something feels wrong. Your home carries a heaviness you can't explain. Family arguments erupt over nothing. Your sleep is restless, filled with disturbing dreams, and the worst part, it feels like even Saint Michael the Archangel has stepped away from your life. You're not imagining things, and you're definitely not alone in this struggle. What if I told you that right now, sitting in your living room, bedroom, or kitchen, there are objects that you consider completely harmless, maybe even beautiful, that are actually blocking the most powerful defense available to any Christian? What if the very things you've welcomed into your home are the reason your prayers feel like they're hitting a wall? Padre Pio, the saint who could see beyond the veil of the physical world, revealed a sacred truth that most Christians have forgotten. He discovered that certain objects in our homes don't just gather dust. They create supernatural disruption. They block the presence of Saint Michael the Archangel and open doorways for negative influences to enter our sacred spaces. Have you ever wondered why your house feels different than it used to? Why peace seems to slip away even when you're trying your hardest to live a faithful life? Why your family members seem more irritable, more distant, more prone to conflict than before? The answer might be simpler than you think, yet more serious than you've ever imagined. During his mystical life, Padre Pio possessed an extraordinary gift. He could perceive the divine realm with startling clarity. Angels and demons weren't abstract concepts to him. They were as real and visible as the people who came seeking his guidance. And through this heavenly sight, he witnessed something that shook him deeply. Faithful Christians unknowingly surrounding themselves with objects that repel celestial safeguarding. There's a documented account of Padre Pio counseling a woman who came to him in desperation. She had been suffering from supernatural oppression for months. Despite attending daily Mass, praying the Rosary, and living what seemed like an exemplary Catholic life, she felt constantly under attack. Her home had become a battlefield of unexplained phenomena, family discord, and an overwhelming sense of divine darkness. After listening to her story, Padre Pio closed his eyes in prayer. When he opened them, his response was both gentle and shocking. You pray to Saint Michael, but your house is filled with things that drive away his light. He then added words that would later become crucial guidance for countless souls. The enemy doesn't enter through the front door. He infiltrates through the objects you keep out of ignorance. This revelation isn't just about superstition or old-fashioned thinking. This is about understanding a sacred reality that affects your daily life, your family's well-being, and your ability to receive the shielding that God wants to provide through his mighty archangel. Today, you're going to discover exactly which objects create this heavenly blockage. You'll learn what Padre Pio specifically warned about regarding the hidden power of contaminated items. Most importantly, you'll discover how to restore your home as a fortress of faith, a place where Saint Michael can work with his full supernatural authority. But before we continue, I need you to do something important. If you believe in the power of Saint Michael's guardianship, if you trust in the wisdom that Padre Pio received through his mystical gifts, write in the comments below, Saint Michael, protect my home. This isn't just engagement for the video. It's a declaration of faith that opens your heart to receive the truth you're about to hear. Your comment also helps this message reach other families who desperately need this divine guidance. Because here's what most people don't realize. Saint Michael the Archangel isn't just any angel. He's the commander of heaven's armies. He's the one who cast Lucifer out of paradise. He's the warrior who stands between the forces of darkness and the children of God. But his presence is holy, and he cannot remain where there is sacred contamination. The 5 objects I'm about to reveal might shock you. Some of them are probably in your home right now. Some might have been gifts from people you love. Others might be things you've owned for years without a second thought. But according to Padre Pio's mystical insights, each of these items creates supernatural static that interferes with angelic defense. To understand why these objects have such power over our divine environment, we need to grasp who Saint Michael truly is and why his presence in our homes is absolutely crucial for our security and peace. Saint Michael the Archangel stands as God's supreme military commander. When Lucifer rebelled against the Most High, it wasn't a committee of angels that responded. It was Michael who stepped forward with his flaming sword. His very name, Michael, means "who is like God," a battle cry that shattered the pride of the fallen angels and established the order of heaven. But Michael's role didn't end with that cosmic battle. Throughout Scripture and the testimonies of countless saints, we see him as the defender of God's people, the guardian of the faithful, and the warrior who stands watch at the threshold between light and darkness. When the prophet Daniel needed divine intervention, Michael was sent. When Moses died, Michael fought for his soul. When the end times approach, it will be Michael who sounds the trumpet. This isn't folklore or religious imagination. This is the reality of supernatural warfare that surrounds us every day, whether we acknowledge it or not. Padre Pio understood this reality better than perhaps any saint in modern history. His mystical gifts weren't simply about healing the sick or reading souls, though he did both with remarkable frequency. Padre Pio could literally see the invisible battle taking place around him. He witnessed angels and demons as clearly as he saw the pilgrims who traveled thousands of miles to seek his counsel. During his lifetime, fellow friars and visitors documented hundreds of instances where Padre Pio would suddenly look up from prayer, his eyes following something invisible to everyone else in the room. Sometimes he would smile, acknowledging the presence of his guardian angel or other heavenly beings. Other times, his face would grow stern, and he would make the sign of the cross repeatedly, driving away dark forces that threatened those under his care. This supernatural sight allowed Padre Pio to understand something that escapes most people. The physical objects in our environment don't just affect us materially, they influence us supernaturally. Every item we choose to keep in our homes either invites light or creates shadow. Every decoration, every piece of jewelry, every book and image sends a divine signal that attracts either celestial coverage or negative disruption. When Padre Pio told that suffering woman that her house was full of things that drive away St. Michael's light, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing a sacred principle as real and measurable as the laws of physics. Many people drawn to deepen their understanding of Padre Pio's teachings have found incredible value in his complete insights. The e-book, The Spiritual Secrets of St. Padre Pio, contains his most transformative prayers for home defense, daily practices for supernatural strength, and guidance for recognizing negative influences. You can find the link in the pinned comment below. Now, returning to why this matters so urgently for your daily life. Think about your home right now. Consider the energy you feel when you walk through your front door. Is there peace, or is there tension hanging in the air? Do your family members naturally gravitate toward gathering together, or does everyone retreat to separate rooms? Do you sleep soundly, or do you find yourself tossing and turning, perhaps even experiencing disturbing dreams? These aren't just psychological phenomena. According to Padre Pio's understanding, they're often the result of divine contamination that blocks heavenly coverage and allows negative influences to take hold. The truth is, Saint Michael wants to be present in your home. He desires to stand guard over your family, to create an atmosphere of peace and security that no earthly force can penetrate. But His holiness cannot coexist with objects that carry supernatural darkness or confusion. This is why Padre Pio was so specific in his warnings. He didn't speak in vague generalities about staying close to God. He identified particular objects, specific items that create sacred disruption and prevent angelic shielding from operating at full strength. When we ignore these warnings, we're not just missing out on potential blessings. We're actively hindering the very safeguarding that could shield our families from supernatural attack, emotional turmoil, and the countless ways that darkness tries to infiltrate our daily lives. But when we take these teachings seriously, when we align our homes with the divine principles that Padre Pio discovered through his mystical gifts, something remarkable happens. The atmosphere changes. Peace returns. Family relationships improve. Sleep becomes restful. Prayer feels more powerful and connected. This transformation doesn't require years of theological training or special mystical abilities. It simply requires the wisdom to recognize what belongs in a Christian home and the courage to remove what doesn't belong. The first category of objects that Padre Pio identified as divinely dangerous includes what many people consider harmless safeguarding items from other traditions. These are things like the evil eye charms, crystal pendants, dream catchers, Celtic symbols, feng shui mirrors, or any object that promises supernatural defense outside of Christian faith. You might be thinking, but these things are supposed to protect me. How could they be harmful? This is exactly the sacred confusion that Padre Pio warned about. As he told countless souls who came to him with similar questions, defenses outside of God are merely illusions that attract what is worst. The divine principle here is profound. When we seek safeguarding from sources other than God, we're essentially telling Saint Michael and the heavenly hosts that we don't trust their power to shield us. We're opening our sacred lives to influences that may appear helpful, but operate outside of celestial authority. It's like hiring a security guard for your home while leaving all the windows and doors unlocked. These objects carry the supernatural energy of the belief systems they come from. A dream catcher doesn't just catch dreams. It connects your home to the mystical practices of its origin. An evil eye charm doesn't just ward off negativity, it invites forces that operate independently of Christian defense. Crystals positioned for energy healing don't just look pretty, they create divine frequencies that can interfere with angelic presence. Padre Pio could see this disruption clearly. He witnessed how these objects created what he described as heavenly static, a kind of sacred confusion that makes it difficult for angels to operate effectively in that environment. The second type of problematic objects involves false representations of angels themselves. These include decorative angel figurines with distorted features, seductive appearances, or no faces at all. You've probably seen them in gift shops. Ethereal figures with flowing robes but deliberately obscured faces, or angels depicted with sensual rather than holy characteristics. Padre Pio's response to these was particularly strong. Where there is falsity, there is no room for God's true archangel. The issue isn't that angels can't be represented in art. Throughout Christian history, beautiful and holy depictions of angels have inspired faith and devotion. The problem is when these representations distort the true nature of angelic beings, or present them in ways that appeal to worldly rather than divine sensibilities. True angels, as described in Scripture and witnessed by saints like Padre Pio, are beings of overwhelming holiness and power. They inspire awe, reverence, and sometimes even fear in the face of their celestial authority. When we surround ourselves with cute, decorative, or sensually appealing angel images, we're training our sacred perception to expect something entirely different from what real angelic coverage looks and feels like. This creates a mismatch between our expectations and divine reality. St. Michael may be trying to make his presence known in your home, but if your mental image of angelic shielding is based on false representations, you might not recognize his actual presence when it manifests. The third category is perhaps the most overlooked yet potentially dangerous: inherited objects that carry negative supernatural history. These are items passed down from family members or acquired from people who practiced occultism, witchcraft, spiritualism, or who lived in patterns of serious sin and sacred darkness. Everything that comes from darkness carries darkness, Padre Pio explained to those who struggled with this issue. Objects aren't just physical items. They can absorb and retain the divine energy of their previous owners and the environments where they've been kept. This doesn't mean every antique or family heirloom is supernaturally contaminated, but it does mean we need sacred discernment about what we allow into our homes. That beautiful jewelry box from your grandmother who practiced fortune-telling, the artwork from an estate sale where you felt an unexplained chill, the furniture piece that seems to bring arguments wherever it's placed. These items might be carrying more than just physical history. Padre Pio often counseled people to pay attention to how they felt around certain inherited objects. Do you feel peaceful or agitated? Do family conflicts seem to increase when that particular item is prominently displayed? Do you experience unusual dreams or feelings of unease in rooms where certain inherited pieces are kept? The sacred principle here isn't about being superstitious. It's about being divinely aware. Just as we wouldn't knowingly bring physically contaminated items into our homes, we shouldn't ignore the possibility of supernatural contamination either. The fourth type of object that blocks St. Michael's coverage might surprise you because it involves sacred items that have been neglected or damaged: broken crucifixes, forgotten religious statues, or holy images that have been allowed to gather dust or fall into disrepair. Padre Pio felt deep pain whenever he encountered crucifixes lying on the ground, covered with dust or broken and ignored. A broken crucifix is the symbol of abandoned faith, he would say. And the enemy grows stronger where there is carelessness. This teaching reveals something crucial about the divine significance of sacred objects. A crucifix isn't just a decoration. It's a powerful supernatural symbol that represents Christ's victory over death and evil. When we allow these symbols to become damaged, forgotten, or treated carelessly, we're sending a celestial message about our relationship with the faith they represent. St. Michael and the heavenly hosts respond to the sacred atmosphere we create through our actions and attitudes. When holy symbols are neglected, it signals that our reverence for the divine realities they represent has also become neglected. This creates an environment where celestial guardianship feels less welcome and less necessary. This doesn't mean we need to become obsessive about the perfect maintenance of every religious item in our homes. But it does mean that the way we care for sacred symbols reflects and affects our receptivity to heavenly defense. The fifth and final category includes images and objects that glorify death, chaos, violence, or fear. These might be artwork featuring skulls and macabre themes, posters or decorations from music bands that promote messages of hatred or blasphemy, horror movie memorabilia, or any imagery that celebrates darkness rather than light. Padre Pio's insight on this was particularly direct. Even when they call it art, the demon uses aesthetics to infiltrate. The divine principle here is that what we choose to look at regularly shapes our sacred atmosphere and influences our mental and emotional state. This doesn't mean Christians can't appreciate artistic expression, or that every serious or dramatic artwork is supernaturally dangerous. The issue is when we surround ourselves with images that consistently focus on death, violence, despair, or rebellion against celestial order. Our homes should be sanctuaries where our souls can rest and find peace. When we fill our living spaces with imagery that glorifies the very things that Christ came to overcome, death, darkness, hopelessness, and evil, we create an atmosphere that makes it difficult for heavenly safeguarding to feel welcomed and comfortable. Think about how you feel when you walk into a room filled with dark, violent, or chaotic imagery versus how you feel in a space filled with beautiful, peaceful, and uplifting images. Your emotional and divine response isn't just psychological. It's reflecting a real, supernatural dynamic that affects your receptivity to celestial presence and coverage. Each of these 5 categories of objects creates what Padre Pio described as sacred obstruction, a kind of divine disruption that makes it difficult for Saint Michael to exercise his full defensive authority in your home. The cumulative effect of multiple problematic objects can create an environment where angelic shielding is severely limited, leaving families vulnerable to supernatural attack, emotional turmoil, and the various ways that darkness tries to infiltrate Christian homes. When St. Michael's defense is blocked or diminished in a home, the effects aren't subtle. Padre Pio described these consequences with the clarity of someone who had witnessed them countless times. A house without divine light is an open field for demons, and many Christians live surrounded by them without knowing it. The most immediate sign is often mental confusion that seems to come from nowhere. You might find yourself struggling to think clearly about simple decisions, feeling overwhelmed by everyday problems that used to be manageable, or experiencing persistent anxiety that doesn't seem connected to any specific concern. This isn't just stress or natural worry. It's the result of supernatural disruption interfering with your mental peace. Family relationships begin to deteriorate in ways that feel disproportionate to any actual conflicts. Arguments erupt over trivial matters. Family members become more irritable with each other, more likely to misunderstand each other's intentions, and less able to resolve conflicts peacefully. The home stops feeling like a refuge and starts feeling like a battlefield where everyone is on edge for reasons they can't quite explain. Prayer life becomes frustrating and seemingly ineffective. Despite maintaining your regular devotions, attending Mass, and trying to live faithfully, you feel like your prayers are hitting a ceiling. The sense of connection with God that once brought comfort and strength feels distant and unreachable. This isn't because God has abandoned you, but because divine interference is disrupting your ability to receive the grace that's constantly flowing toward you. Physical and emotional exhaustion becomes chronic, even when you're getting adequate rest and nutrition. You wake up tired, struggle with energy throughout the day, and feel emotionally drained by interactions that shouldn't be particularly challenging. This persistent fatigue often comes with feelings of oppression, sadness, or anxiety that seem to hang over you like a heavy blanket. Sleep disturbances become common, ranging from simple insomnia to disturbing dreams that leave you feeling unsettled throughout the following day. Your bedroom, which should be your most peaceful retreat, might begin to feel uncomfortable or even unwelcoming. Maria, a 58-year-old grandmother from Arizona, experienced this heavenly blockage firsthand. For over a year, her home had been filled with tension that no one could explain. Her adult children avoided visiting because they felt inexplicably uncomfortable in her house. When they did come for family dinners, conversations felt strained and often ended in arguments about trivial matters that would never have caused problems before. Maria found herself crying frequently, deep, soul-wrenching tears that seemed to come from nowhere. She would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching her, though she lived alone. Despite praying daily and attending weekly Mass, the oppressive atmosphere only grew heavier. Then Maria heard a teaching about objects that can interfere with sacred coverage. As she walked through her home with new awareness, she noticed items she'd never considered problematic. A decorative dream catcher that her daughter had given her during a bohemian phase. Several crystals she'd collected over the years because she thought they were pretty, and an antique mirror she'd inherited from her aunt, who had been heavily involved in fortune-telling and card reading. The decision to remove these items wasn't easy. The dream catcher represented her daughter's thoughtfulness. The crystals had been expensive and were genuinely beautiful. The mirror held decades of family history. But Maria trusted the teaching she'd received and, with tears in her eyes, boxed everything up and donated it to a thrift store far from her neighborhood. Within 3 days of removing these items from her home, Maria noticed a shift so dramatic it felt miraculous. The oppressive feeling that had hung over her house like a thick fog began to lift. She slept through the night for the first time in months. Her next family gathering was the most peaceful they'd had in over a year. Her children lingered after dinner, laughing and sharing stories like they used to. Maria described the change as like someone had opened all the windows and let fresh air flow through every room, except it was fresh heavenly air. David, a 42-year-old father and small business owner, struggled with a different manifestation of blocked divine defense. Despite his efforts to provide sacred leadership for his family, his teenage children seemed increasingly rebellious and distant from their faith. His 16-year-old son had become sullen and argumentative. His 14-year-old daughter was having nightmares almost nightly, and the family couldn't seem to have a peaceful conversation anymore. His marriage was strained by constant financial stress and communication problems that hadn't existed in their earlier years together. David felt like he was failing as a father and husband, despite working harder than ever to provide for his family. After learning about supernatural contamination in the home, David realized that his basement office, where he spent hours each day managing his business, was filled with music memorabilia from his younger years. The walls were covered with posters and framed albums from bands that promoted dark themes, anti-religious messages, and imagery celebrating rebellion against authority. Though he no longer listened to this music, and his faith had grown significantly since those days, he'd kept the items because they represented important memories from his youth and had significant monetary value. The removal process was emotionally challenging. These items weren't just decorations. They were connected to his identity, his friendships from that time period, and some of his most formative experiences. But as David prayed for guidance, he felt a clear conviction that these objects no longer represented who he was or who he wanted to be. With his wife's support, he spent a weekend carefully removing every poster, album, and piece of memorabilia that didn't align with his current values. The transformation in David's family was gradual but unmistakable. Within 2 weeks, his son's attitude began to soften. He started joining family conversations again and even asked to attend Mass with them. His daughter's nightmares stopped completely, and she began sleeping peacefully through the night. Business decisions that had felt overwhelming became clearer, and the persistent anxiety that had plagued David for years began to diminish. Most remarkably, he and his wife found themselves talking and laughing together like they had in their early marriage years. Both Maria and David discovered what Padre Pio had taught throughout his ministry. Our physical environment profoundly affects our divine environment. When we remove objects that create sacred disruption, we make space for the guardianship and peace that Saint Michael wants to provide. The key insight from these experiences is that the effects of supernatural interference often seem unrelated to any specific objects. We don't typically think to connect family problems, sleep issues, or persistent anxiety with the decorative items in our homes. But as Padre Pio understood through his mystical perception, these connections are real and significant. Now that you understand which objects create divine interference, the question becomes, how do you restore your home as a fortress of faith where St. Michael can exercise his full defensive authority? Padre Pio provided specific guidance for this sacred restoration, and the process is both practical and deeply meaningful. The first step requires divine preparation through prayer for discernment. Before you begin examining your home, kneel down and pray with sincere intention. Lord, show me what doesn't belong to you. This isn't just a formality, it's an invitation for celestial wisdom to guide your perception. You're asking God to open your sacred eyes to see what might be creating disruption with heavenly coverage. During this prayer, ask specifically for the courage to remove items that might have sentimental value but lack divine value. Some of the objects you'll need to address might be gifts from loved ones, family heirlooms, or items that represent significant memories. The strength to prioritize supernatural health over emotional attachment comes through grace, not willpower alone. The second step involves conducting a thorough sacred review of every room in your home. Walk through each space slowly, paying attention not just to obvious religious items, but to everything that carries symbolic meaning. Examine your bedroom, living areas, kitchen, and even storage spaces. Look at books, artwork, jewelry, decorative objects, inherited items, and anything that makes a statement about your values or beliefs. As you review each item, ask yourself, does this object honor God? Does it promote peace, love, holiness, and truth? Or does it glorify darkness, confusion, rebellion, or mystical practices outside of Christian faith? Trust your divine instincts during this process. If something feels uncomfortable or questionable, that discomfort might be sacred discernment at work. The third step requires decisive action in removing everything that doesn't align with your Christian faith. This isn't about being judgmental toward other belief systems, but about creating celestial clarity in your own home. Some items should be thrown away completely, especially if they're specifically designed for non-Christian practices. Others might need to be burned if they're particularly connected to occult traditions. Items that are simply inappropriate rather than supernaturally dangerous can be donated or given away, but make sure they leave your property entirely. The fourth step involves divine cleansing of your physical space using holy water. If you have holy water from your church, sprinkle it in the corners of each room, around doorways and windows, and in any areas where problematic objects were previously kept. As you do this, pray for God's blessing and shielding over each space. If you don't have holy water, you can obtain it from most Catholic churches, or you can ask your priest to bless water for this purpose. The fifth step focuses on establishing St. Michael's visible presence in your home. Place a holy image or statue of St. Michael the Archangel near your main entrance, positioned so that he can serve as the divine guardian of everyone who enters and leaves. This isn't superstition. It's a physical reminder of the supernatural coverage you're invoking and a declaration that your home operates under heavenly authority. The sixth and final step involves establishing a daily practice of praying to St. Michael for defense. Make this prayer part of your regular routine, speaking it with faith and conviction as a true soldier of Christ. The consistency of this practice maintains and strengthens the sacred atmosphere you've created through the previous steps. Scripture reminds us in Ephesians 6:12 that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the forces of evil in the heavenly realms. When we align our homes with these divine realities, we position ourselves to receive the full safeguarding that God provides through St. Michael's intercession. What you've learned today isn't just theological theory. It's practical wisdom that can transform your daily experience of faith, family, and peace. Padre Pio's mystical insights about objects that block St. Michael's coverage offer you a clear path to restore your home as the sanctuary it was meant to be. Remember, this isn't about living in fear of everyday objects or becoming superstitious about your possessions. This is about divine awareness, understanding that everything in your environment either supports or hinders your connection with celestial defense. When you remove items that create supernatural disruption, you're not just cleaning house, you're making space for the peace, guardianship, and presence that St. Michael wants to provide. The transformation won't necessarily happen overnight, but it will happen. As you apply these principles with faith and consistency, you'll begin to notice subtle changes in your home's atmosphere. Family relationships will feel more harmonious. Your prayers will feel more connected and powerful. Sleep will become more restful. The persistent anxiety or tension that may have plagued your household will begin to lift. Most importantly, you'll sense St. Michael's presence more clearly, not as a distant concept, but as a real, active guardian watching over your family with the authority and power of heaven itself. Now close your eyes and pray with me. Glorious St. Michael the Archangel, defender of souls and destroyer of darkness, visit my home now with your light. Reveal everything that drives away your presence. Take with you every object, image, or energy that belongs to the darkness. Seal my house with your flaming sword. Purify my doors, windows, walls, thoughts, and intentions. Remain here. Live with me. Cry out over my life your victory shout. Who is like God? Amen. If these teachings have touched your heart and opened your eyes to divine truths you hadn't considered before, share your experience in the comments below. Rightship protection activated. If you're committed to applying what you've learned, your testimony could be exactly what another family needs to hear. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss guidance that could strengthen your life of faith. Share this video with 3 people who need this shielding in their homes. And if you feel your home still needs even stronger divine defense, stay tuned. In our next video, we'll reveal a sacred object that, when placed at your front door, creates an impenetrable barrier against evil influences. Padre Pio recommended this powerful symbol with absolute confidence. You won't want to miss it. Until then, may St. Michael's coverage surround you, your family, and your home with the unshakable peace of celestial authority.